Hello, welcome to Tea and Biscuits and Murder. I'm your host, not Dr. Alan Campbell, and this is Boxy. Boxy, you're looking terribly tropical today. That's because we are coconut and pineapple and murder. Vacationing in the land of Ohana, right, Boxy? Our subject, oh dear, the Butthurt Hotline, even on vacation, oh Boxy. Our subject, as always, is Dr. George Hodel Jr., serial killer, evil genius, criminal mastermind, and all-round bad egg. This is a podcast that we missed, Death by Misadventure. They're talking to retired Detective Steve Hodel. Let's see what they have to say. Ready, Boxy? Ready, steady, away we go.
Elizabeth Short. In 1947, California's infamous Black Dahlia murder inspired the largest manhunt in Los Angeles' history. Yet despite an unprecedented allocation of money and manpower, police investigators failed to identify the person responsible for the sadistic murder and mutilation of beautiful 22-year-old Elizabeth Short.
It is right so far, right, Boxy? So far, so good.
Decades later, former LAPD homicide detective turned private investigator Steve Hodel launched his investigation into the gruesome unsolved crime.
Oh, yes, he did. Yes, he did. Right, Boxy?
It led him to a shockingly unexpected perpetrator.
No, it didn't. It led to his dad, George Hodel Jr. Bad egg, serial killer, criminal genius, all-round evil mastermind.
His father, Dr. George Hodel, who he discovered has been a suspect in the infamous murder case for more than 50 years.
You don't think that's quite true, is it, Boxy? He was a suspect for that. Yeah, but 5.5 weeks, Boxy, I think is more like it. And then he was eliminated. This coconut's not bad, is it? You like your pineapple?
Today, I joined Steve Hodel for a fascinating discussion about his New York Times best-selling book, The Black Dahlia Avenger.
Oh, the Black Dahlia Avenger! I'm ready. You ready, Boxy?
We explore Elizabeth Short's case in depth, and Steve details why he believes his father, Dr. George Hodel, is not only responsible for her murder, but was a prolific serial killer for 40 years.
Oh, I think Steve says he did 50 killings in 50 years. Something like that. Kind of a lot.
He explains why a police cover-up may have stopped the Black Dahlia murder and several other lone woman murders from ever being solved.
Does he now? Really? Please cover up, eh? Okay.
I'm Jacy Nova. This is Death by Misadventure.
Oh dear, music. Don't think we... No? Music! Oh, I don't want to listen to music. Oh, I don't want to listen to music. No.
Hodel is not only responsible for her... Hodel is not only...
Spooky music, eh?
I am fascinated about your background. Can you tell me about your career as a...
Oh, yes. Steve Hodel loves to talk about his career. 300 solves, I believe.
Homicide detective.
I'm one of those
Worked all the tables.
little dinosaurs. At 17 years old, I went into the Navy for 4 years, got out,
Part of the new breed, I think.
and in 1963, I joined LAPD. It was part of the new breed.
Ah, the new breed. Thank you. That was on my bingo card, Boxy. It was on yours, too.
William Parker was our new chief, and he
Oh, Steve, now William Parker had been chief for about a decade, so I don't think you could call him a new chief, can you? I don't think so. I don't think somebody who's been doing a job for 10 years can be called new. Don't think so. Not how it works.
He's going to clean up Dodge. So he brought a lot of us young, eager guys aboard. And I started out in 63 and went through the academy. Basically
worked all the tables, I think, comes next.
5 years in patrol, uniform patrol, working different divisions. And I wound up in the Hollywood division, patrol.
Where he spent the rest of his career.
That for a few years. And then I switched over and went into detectives as a young man with 5 years on the job. And basically worked all the different tables, burglary, robbery.
300 solves.
Juvenile, child sex crimes. And then wound up working the homicide table. And basically I stayed at Hollywood Homicide for my entire career.
Never went down to RHD. No. At Parker Center. Nope. Didn't happen.
17 years in homicide, over 300 murder investigations during my career.
Oh, is it 300 investigations or 300 solves, Steve? You solve every one? Probably. I would think so, right, you? Right, Boxy?
A lot of crime, a lot of murders back then in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So it was like every 3 or 4 days we'd have a new murder. So it was quite challenging. A lot of good guys, working with a lot of good guys. We had the highest solve rate on the department. We were running about 75–80% solve, which was quite a bit higher than the average. In 1986, I retired from...
Went to Bellingham, Washington. Get out of evil Los Angeles.
LAPD and moved up north to Bellingham, Washington. I had 2 young boys and wanted to get them out of the mean streets of LA. So retired, and I got a PI license up there, both in California and Washington State, and started...
This tastes like coconut, Boxy. I suppose that's because it is coconut. You enjoying your pineapple?
Doing criminal defense work. So 24 years on the prosecution, and then 20, it's been now 35 years.
Ain't life funny, Detective Hodel?
For the defense, but all criminal.
That's fascinating. What did you find was the biggest challenge being a homicide detective?
Oh, I think telling the truth, perhaps?
Basically, remaining objective. Basically...
Telling the truth? Oh, is this where Steve is going to buy a soda pop? Have a cup of coffee with a guy who just killed his child? You think this is this part of the story?
Treating everybody the same, whether they were from the top of society or the bottom. Going in there and remaining objective and...
Detective Hodel is known for his objectivity and impartiality, isn't he, Boxy? Wonder if he'll talk about you, Boxy. Do you think he'll mention what's in the district attorney's files, you think? I wonder. That would be fun.
Being sincere. Not
oh, yes, Detective Hodel is so sincere.
playing any real games. Again, a lot of it had to do, in solving murders, a lot of it has to do with getting admissions, getting cop-outs.
Pro tip, boys and girls. If you're suspected of a murder, don't talk to the cops without your attorney. It's not a good idea. They're not your friends. No. Yeah. See? Boxy says so too. If you are charged with a murder, if you're accused with a murder, if you're being questioned about a murder, don't talk to the police without an attorney. It's not smart.
You go in there with a chip on your shoulder or something like that, you're not going to get a confession. You're not going to get the truth.
Oh, come on, Steve. Buy a cup of coffee for the guy who just killed his kid. Come on, you can do it.
From the suspect. So basically, I'd say I was taught how to be objective.
Oh, I think he forgot how to do that.
Throughout a case. And it was hard because you walk in there and there's a father that's just...
Oh, here it comes! It's the guy who just killed his child. Oh, yes. Steve's going to buy him a cup of coffee. Or a soda pop.
Beat his 7-year-old son to death. And you have to give him a cigarette, a cup of coffee.
Oh, yes, this is a good one. Let me tell you, if you are accused of killing your child, don't talk to the cops without an attorney. Don't do it. No.
Yeah, I'm sure there's no side to this. Let's talk about it. And that's hard.
No, let's not talk about it, Detective Hodel. No, we're not talking.
Because inside you're raging about the absolute horror of the crime itself, but at the same time, you need to get a cop out. So that's probably the biggest thing I learned and was fairly successful at.
Why do you think some murders go unsolved?
Because Steve Hodel's dad didn't do them, perhaps? That could be the reason.
There are a bunch of reasons. One of the factors is time. Like I said, when you're jumping from a new murder every 3 or 4 days, you just don't have the time to be able to put into any one investigation. You'd love to be able to work them all for 6 months or a year. And it's changed a lot. You know, in my day, of course, we didn't have DNA. We didn't have all the sophisticated tools at hand that we have today. The clearance range should be a lot higher. And of course, DNA wasn't even heard of back then. I think DNA was discovered in England in around...
Oh, yes, Detective Hodel is going to talk about the history of DNA. Lovely.
83, as I recall, and I retired in 86, so it was not a tool in our kit.
So I want to talk about the Black Dahlia murder.
Oh, please do. We're all ears, aren't we, Boxy?
And for our listeners that may not be familiar with it, which I would...
Oh, who was Elizabeth Short, Steve? Please tell us. Please inform us.
Be surprised, since it's such a famous case. But if you can give an overview of the Black Dahlia murder, and then we can talk more about the case and your connection to it.
The Black Dahlia murder occurred on January 15th, 1947.
Oh, he's got that right. That's good.
In Los Angeles.
Yes, that's true too.
About 5 miles south of Hollywood, in an area called Lemert Park.
Again, that's true.
A young woman was walking her young daughter, 3-year-old daughter, in a stroller to market. And
she was walking her daughter in a stroller. Okay.
And she looked over in the vacant lot and she saw what she thought was a mannequin. And she looked again and she says, I don't know if that's a mannequin or is it a body or what. Anyway, she said, that's going to scare the kids on their way to school. So she hurried down about a block and door.
That's kind of sort of true. Sort of. Not bad. B+.
Knocked a place, asked to use the phone, called the police. Said there's a body or a mannequin or something out here in the vacant lot. LAPD responds, and to their horror, it's a woman, completely nude, completely severed in half.
Severed is usually in half, Steve. Pretty much how it works.
Surgically and carefully posed just off the sidewalk on this vacant lot.
Now, is Steve going to say Elizabeth Short's body was found near Degnan, or in proximity to Degnan, or just off Degnan? What is he going to say? The body was found on Norton. What will he say? I'm betting he's going to say it was left off Degnan. We'll see.
And she's a Jane Doe. No ID, no
True.
Clothing, no nothing. So she remains a Jane Doe for a couple of days. And they send her fingerprints back to the FBI. And
that's true.
And they get a hit immediately within several hours of receiving it. And her name is Elizabeth Short.
Yes, also true.
She's 22.
Yes.
She's from Medford, Massachusetts.
Yes.
That begins this incredible investigation. The reporters actually, back in those days in the 40s, the reporters were often way ahead of the cops in the investigation. They had the resources and the expense accounts and stuff. So, of course, it became headlines, you know, this nude body posed.
It's not exactly what the headline said, Steve, but okay.
And then the name. One of the aggressive reporters found out that she hung out in a pharmacy, a soda fountain in Long Beach.
Pretty much true, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that the guys in there, and this is during the
Got her hotline again, Boxy.
4 years, they called her the Black Dahlia when she came in there.
Again, that's pretty much true.
She had long black hair. There was a movie that came out that same summer called The Blue Dahlia,
yep.
Which was a famous a noir film, very popular. And this was kind of a spin.
With Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. Yes.
Off of that, they called her the Black Dahlia, even though the Blue Dahlia was a bar, not a person. But anyway, so you have that name, Black Dahlia, and a beautiful young woman cut in half and all of these gory details. So it was headlines for like 30, 40 days.
It varies. Yeah.
Above the fold.
Not necessarily. Do go on.
They started investigating it, and probably LA's most infamous crime to this day.
Did they initially have any suspects that they were looking at?
Yeah, they found out some boyfriends she was dating. There was a guy named Red Man.
Yes, Red Manley. Yes, right. Yes.
Who was actually the last person supposedly to see her alive.
Oh, we're going to get into the missing week and how there isn't any really any missing week, but yes, there he is. Okay, Red Manley. Yes, left her at the Biltmore. Yes. This tastes like coconut. I suppose because it is.
He had met her in Long Beach. He was.
What? No, he didn't. He met her in San Diego. Steve? Oh, come on. You can do better than that. Met her in San Diego.
A married guy, but he met her on the street. She was at a bus bench, and he pulled up and introduced.
San Diego. Detective Hodel is challenged with details sometimes.
Herself, and she wanted to come back to Los Angeles.
From San Diego, Steve, not Long Beach. San Diego.
He gave her a ride back, dropped her. She had a suitcase which she dropped at the bus station, checked it into a lock.
There are actually several suitcases, Steve, not one. Again, the small details are a challenge for Detective 3 Hodel.
And then he took her to the Biltmore Hotel downtown.
Yes.
And she was going to meet her sister.
No, she wasn't. That was a lie.
So he drops her off there, and that's the last he's seen of her. He's located, he's identified, becomes a suspect. He's given a polygraph, passes the poly, and...
Let me point out that the polygraph is not admissible in court. And, more important, the polygraph was extremely primitive in 1947. Do go on, Detective Hodel.
And given a clean bill of health, he was a suspect. He was actually arrested initially, held for 48 hours, and then released. Ultimately, they would discover that he was in San Francisco at the time of the murders.
Yes. No, that's not true. No, that's not true, Detective Hodel. He was playing bridge with his wife and a couple of other people. They couldn't find him because he was in San Francisco. He was playing bridge. He had an alibi that he was in Los Angeles, jewel of Southern California.
Well, he was cleared on that in the later investigation. They checked with a bunch of different boyfriends and army people, and no real hardcore suspect became public at that time.
What was Elizabeth Short doing in Los Angeles? Had she been living there for an extended period of time?
Oh, I can't wait to hear the answer to this one. Can you, Boxy? Elizabeth Short got to Los Angeles, actually to Long Beach, in the summer of 1946, about July, late July. Then came up to Hollywood shortly after that, That's the real story. What will Steve say?
Or did she come out to Hollywood to be an actress, or do you know what her background was?
One of the things on this, Jacy, is that there's so much myth wrapped around the...
Yes, Steve Hodel's so bad with myths. He hates myths. Truth is his god.
Truth. And in all my other investigations, basically you start out with a tabula rasa, a blank tablet, and you move forward. In this case, I started out with all of this myth and half-truths and complete falsities. I had to kind of remove the myth.
Yes, let me point out that one of the biggest myth makers in the Black Dahlia case is, you know who? Steve Hodel. Yes, that's the real story.
Before I could move forward. So there were a lot of myths. One of those was, as you say, she came out to become an actress and be discovered. Not true. She never had any desire to become an actress. She was never involved in any films, no testing, nothing like that.
That's true. That's actually true, yes.
She was basically just an innocent girl. She was 22 going on 16, let's say. She left home early and kind of bounced around. She'd gone to Florida. She was all about falling in love and wanting to marry Lieutenant Wright.
Not sure that's true, Steve. I think that she did. She was engaged at one point to be married. And then her fiancé was killed at the end of World War II. You might mention that. Kind of important in her life, as short as it was.
She wanted to marry a military guy and live happily ever after. Quite naive.
I think a lot of young women during World War II wanted to do that. I don't think there's anything exceptional about that.
She ultimately came out to the shark-infested waters of Los Angeles.
Oh, big bad Los Angeles.
And Hollywood. Of course, lots of guys wanted to date her, and she did date, but she wasn't the prostitute. She was like dating for dinner. So basically, she was a naive, innocent girl that just got caught up with some bad people.
What did she do for a living? Did she have a job at the time of her murder?
No, she did not. She worked people for money. Her mother sent her money, and she got money from various men under less than accurate pretenses, I think you would say. Let's see what Steve says.
She didn't. She was transient. She was staying in Hollywood, sharing a room with 5 other young women.
That's not entirely true, Steve. She moved around quite a bit. She lived with Mark Hansen for a while, crashed in an apartment, shared a hotel. She moved around quite a bit. It's only part of the story, little teeny part.
$1 a day, I think it was.
It's only for a little while.
She was just kind of down and out, had no real money, had no job. She had done some waitressing in Florida, but when she came out to LA, she really had no job. I don't want to say living off men, but she was just hand to mouth and just having a hard time and no real income or of any kind.
What was her relationship like with her family? Was it a troubled background, or was she close with her sister?
Oh, this would be an interesting one. This would be an interesting one. Elizabeth Short regularly got money from her mother, Phoebe. Is what really happened.
The father had left them in the 30s, and he had just taken off. His car was found by a bridge, so some say that it was suspected that he committed suicide. As it would turn out, he came to California, and he was, I think, a bit of an alcoholic living in Northern California. She had 4 sisters.
Kind of, sort of true, a bit true, kind of.
And a mother. My mother had a tough time. Imagine raising 5 girls on her own. Then she discovered.
Why is that funny, Steve? What's funny about being a single mother with 5 daughters? I don't get it.
Or that her father was alive in Northern California. They got a letter. So she went to visit him, and that didn't work out at all. She was there like 10 days, and the father wanted her to be his housemaid, and that wasn't working for her. So she went to Camp Cook.
No, that's not at all what happened. Elizabeth Short came out to live with her father, Cleo, in Vallejo, California. And then he came down with Elizabeth Short to Los Angeles for maybe 10 days, maybe a little bit less. Then she took off for Camp Cook. That's what really happened. Yes, it's a little more accurate.
Which is about 50 miles north of LA.
North of Santa Barbara. Vandenberg Air Force Base now. Right, Boxy?
A military base there, and she got a job there working at the Post Exchange, PX. And she won a little contest there called the Camp Q.
No, Steve. No, I'm afraid it wasn't a beauty contest. It was a weekly paper, a weekly contest in the based newspaper, the Camp Cook Clarion. It was not a beauty contest. So sorry. Mr. I hate myths. Mr. I have to crusade for the truth. That's not how it was.
She won that because of her good looks. In 1943, she was with a couple of Army guys in a bar in Santa Barbara. And
El Paseo.
And she wasn't drinking, but she was only 19 at that time.
She was drinking. Yes, she was drinking. The police not only arrested her, they seized the beer that she was drinking as evidence. Right, Boxy?
And she got arrested for minor possession, meaning she was in the bar underage.
She had alcohol.
She was sent back to Bedford, Massachusetts on the train.
No, on the bus. The train was for rich people. Poor people like Elizabeth Short took the bus.
Ultimately, she would come back out to California and bounce around. She bounced around San Diego for a while and then back to Los Angeles.
Summer of 1946.
And then the last time she was seen was, as the legend goes, she was dropped off by Manley at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown LA, which was a fancy hotel.
Yes.
She was there for a couple of hours, making phone calls to somebody. And then
maybe she was making phone calls. They think they remembered her. They weren't sure, but they thought they remembered her. Maybe.
Supposedly last seen walking out the door into the fog and was missing for 5 days.
It was a bit more than that. Almost a week. Almost a week.
And then her body was found.
Yes.
So in the beginning, the killer began contacting the police within a week of the body's discovery. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So
yes, that would be interesting because George Hodel, massive amounts of mail to the police and the newspapers, right, Steve? Supposedly, at least in Steve world, that's how it is.
3 or 4 days after the body was found, the killers start sending in notes. And these were like kidnap, ransom notes, cut and paste notes, taunting the police, catch me if you can type things. On the 23rd of January, he sends in a note saying, here are some of her belongings. And he sends some of her
yes, he sends
personal effects, her birth certificate and other items to the press. He also calls the press. And
that's the original detectives believed that only the envelope with her belongings was really from the killer, and all the rest were jokes and pranks. That's what the police thought. I think so. Much more likely. Wouldn't you say, Boxy?
Talks to James Richardson, who was the editor of
City editor. James Richardson was the city editor of the Los Angeles Examiner, the morning paper.
one of the large newspapers there, and taunts him and says, I guess you're having trouble solving the case, huh? And Richardson says, yeah, we sure are. We sure could use some help. Says, well, maybe I'll send in a few of her belongings to see if that'll help you along. He sends in this package of...
It's an envelope. It's an envelope. And if you want to read what really happened, or at least another version, probably a little bit more reliable version of what happened, you read a book by Jim Richardson called For the Life of Me, to give you a little bit better idea about what Steve is trying to say.
Belongings and stuff. A few days later, he sends in another note.
Oh, we don't know that's from him. Only the material with her belongings was really from the killer. All the rest were phonies and fakes.
Basically, he says, turning myself in on January 29th.
Had my fun at police.
Had my fun at the police. He signs it Black Dahlia Avenger. Okay? All the others had been disguised or cut and paste.
Oh, I think this is where Steve recognizes his father's handwriting. Steve does a lot of recognizing his father's handwriting. He sees it everywhere. He also recognizes it in the Zodiac. Oh, ain't giving away too much.
Notes and stuff, but this was actually in undisguised handwriting. So
I recognize my father's handwriting.
It's my feeling that he actually initially was going to actually turn himself in. He didn't, but he was going to, because this was undisguised handwriting.
It was a prank. The police didn't believe it either.
And it went on from there.
Your father was questioned and released 3 times.
Yes.
On different murder cases.
No, he wasn't. Only in the parallel universe of Steve World. We have George Hodel, evil genius, serial killer, and criminal mastermind. In reality, George Hodel was only questioned in one case, Black Dahlia. That's it. Never suspected of anything else. Boxy, I think we're getting close to you. I think so.
And when did you first begin to suspect that your dad might have a connection to...
Oh, Tamar, what the hell are you talking about?
To Elizabeth Short's murder. What was your relationship like with your father?
We were very close. I didn't know him.
George.
I was very close to my father.
But I didn't know him.
He was this remarkable individual. So George Hodel...
Oh, here we go. Child genius. IQ of 186. Playing concert at Shrine Auditorium. Oh, I think that's where we're going next.
Was born in Los Angeles in 1907. Russian Jewish parents. A child prodigy at the age...
Playing concert at Shrine Auditorium. No, he wasn't.
Age of 9, he's playing his own piano concerts at the Shrine Auditorium, downtown Los Angeles. Highly gifted pianist.
IQ of 186.
He's also intellectually gifted. He scores the highest high school scores in the history of Los Angeles.
What? Oh.
He's off the charts. 186 IQ, 1 point above Einstein.
Oh dear. Poor Einstein. Steve, poor Einstein never took an IQ test. We can't know what's 1 point above what you don't know. Not how IQ tests work. I don't think so.
Graduates at 14 from high school, goes to Caltech.
Goes to Caltech. Has an affair with the professor's wife. Well, maybe she's a professor. Maybe he's a professor, maybe not. Maybe he's just a friend. I don't know. Do you think the story is true? Steve wants to know. He says it anyway, but he wants to know if it's true.
A prestigious university.
George, you're a child yourself.
Here in Pasadena. Not only is he intellectually
George, you're a child yourself.
Precocious and the musical talent, but he is also sexually precocious. Has an affair with a professor's wife at Caltech. She gets pregnant, busts up her marriage.
George, you're a child yourself.
She goes back east to have the child, which she aptly names Folly.
None of this is true. You cannot find a young girl born at that era named Folly. Didn't happen. Not true. None of this is true. No.
Little young George, still a teenager, goes back and says, I love you, I want to...
George, you're a child yourself. Come on.
Marry you, I want to raise our child. And the woman laughs at him and says, George, you're a child yourself.
See?
Get out of my life, I never want to see you again. He comes back to LA, passes himself off as 21, starts driving taxi cab around Los Angeles.
You don't think you need to be 21 to drive a car, Steve? I don't think so. Or are you talking about a commercial license? Maybe you are.
Then becomes a crime reporter for the...
Oh, the LA Record! Major paper in Los Angeles. Not really. Little nothing paper.
Los Angeles Record, which was one of the big newspapers here.
Little dinky paper, folded during the Depression. No one to mourn it. They would hire anybody.
And he's riding around. This is during...
Oh, it's the Vice Squad. Let's see now. Is it going to be the judge arrested with the blonde or the judge's wife? And let's see. Oh, yes. The bloody ace of spades left next to the body. That's one of my favorite stories. Can't find it. Can't find any of these stories, but that's what Steve Hodel says.
Prohibition, he's riding around with LAPD Vice Squad, they're kicking doors, arresting the judge's wife.
Oh, it's the judge's wife this time. Oh! What happened to the judge with the blonde? Judge's wife. Oh, right. Well, fair enough.
Blonde. He graduates and starts riding around with LAPD homicide guys, writing these tabloids.
Come on, Steve. Bloody ace of spades next to the body. Come on.
Stories about the bloody ace of spades next to the body. This sort of...
What did I tell you? Can't find that story. Can't find it anywhere. You'd think it doesn't exist, except in the mind of Steve Hodel. Not really. Can't find it. I've looked. It ain't there.
He then starts double dating with another...
John Huston. I should say, right, Boxy? I do a magnificent impersonation of John Huston. No one wants to hear that. So sad.
Friend of his, teenage friend named John Huston, who
do a marvelous impersonation of John Huston. No one cares.
Will eventually become the famous film director. And at that time, he was just the son of Walter Huston. His father was a famous stage and screen actor. And they were double dating, and John was dating a woman by the name of Emilia. George was dating a woman by the name of Dorothy. And 2 or 3 weeks into their double dating, they switched. John fell in love with Dorothy. They would run off together, get married, and go.
Yeah, married in Greenwich Village.
Off to New York.
Greenwich Village.
Emilia, I guess it's you and me, babe. She gets pregnant. They all go north to Berkeley, where
they go north to California, where Steve's older half-brother Duncan is born. Oh, so sad. Duncan stopped talking to Steve Hodel over what he wrote in Black Dahlia Venture. Oh dear. Hodel family drama.
And enters pre-med, 4 years there. He then goes across the bay to UC San Francisco, gets his medical degree, has another affair with another woman, and Emilia has a child named Duncan.
Duncan! Yes. Let's hear about Duncan. Tell us all about Duncan and how he didn't talk to you for the rest of his life.
So that will eventually be my half-brother. And then he has another affair with another Dorothy, not the same one. She gets pregnant.
Tamar.
And they have a daughter named Tamar. So there's the 2 women and the 2 children, and he's just got his medical degree. And he goes off and leaves the...
New Mexico. Young George, young Dr. Hodel Jr. goes to New Mexico.
Families and goes to New Mexico and Arizona as a young surgeon. He becomes
No, he's a public health doctor, not a surgeon. Never, ever, ever a surgeon. Never. Public health, tuberculosis, venereal disease, rabies.
sole surgeon at a logging camp.
No. Logging camps don't have surgeons. They send the men off to hospital where they can get good care. That's what happened. No.
He comes back to LA after a couple of years, and at this point,
He probably murdered a few people while he was in New Mexico, don't you think, Steve? Just sort of here and there for fun.
Dorothy that married John, they've been married 7 years. They break up. She comes back, hooks back up with George. My older brother, Mike, is born in...
Yes, Mike is born. Now, this is amusing. Steve likes to say that... Oh, I missed that. Now, did he say that George and one of the Amelia, one of the marriages, Duncan's parents were never married? Anyway, Mike was born before George and Dorothy, former Dorothy Houston, were married. They got married in Mexico. Kind of tropical. Hooray!
39, I come along in 41. My brother Kelvin comes along in 42. Dad joins the health department, LA County, quickly rises to the top.
Quickly rises to the top of the communicable diseases department. Venereal disease, that was his specialty, not surgery.
Becomes a VD specialist, and he's a VD czar of LA County, head of the LA County Health Department. He buys this.
No, he was never head of the LA County Health Department. He was head of the communicable diseases, venereal disease. That's what he did. He was never the head of the entire health department. No, didn't happen.
Rather famous home, the Soden House, which some of your listeners may be aware of, Frank Lloyd Wright Jr. built. It's a Mayan temple in the heart of Hollywood. We move in, we're the Three Little Princes.
Oh, the Three Little Princes. Yes, the Three Little Princes. Now, you know what? I don't think any of that happened. And I'll tell you why. Dorothy Hodel and George Hodel separated. So they weren't living at the Soden house. Nope, that didn't happen.
Dad's the king, mom's the queen, has all cocktail parties and all of this.
No, you know what's peculiar is that Dorothy Hodel said that George didn't like her to drink. He didn't approve of her drinking, and so she didn't drink when he was around. Isn't that curious, Boxy?
Everything goes swimmingly until 1949.
Oh dear. Now, you see, none of that is true. None of that is true. We know that because Steve's parents were separated and then divorced. Steve was living with his brothers and his mum. We know that because every time she got arrested for child neglect, they published her address in the newspaper. We know she wasn't living there. They weren't living there. None of what he just said is true. No.
When there's a knock on the door, Dr. Hodel, yes, LAPD, you're under arrest for incest. So remember that Tamar, the one that was born in 35, she's now 14. She's been living with us.
She wasn't living with you. You weren't there, Steve. You weren't there. What really happened is Tamar is an incorrigible young lady. Her mother can't handle her anymore. Ships her off to George. George doesn't want her. He's a swinging bachelor. Tamar doesn't want to live there because it's icky Los Angeles instead of San Francisco. Did it go well? No, it did not go well. No one was happy. Tamar said that 13 boys at Hollywood High School molested her. Oh, and yes, Dad too, just to even it off. That's what really happened.
And he's arrested for having sex with her and a couple of other adults in the bedroom.
He's arrested for having sex with her and a couple of other adults? No, I don't think he was arrested for having sex with other adults, Steve. I don't think that's how it went.
He gets himself Jerry Geisler, who was the...
Geisler, and he didn't. He got someone in the office, not Jerry. No.
Johnny Cochran of his day, top criminal attorney, 3-week trial.
Let me point out, in case there's any doubt, if you are charged with a crime, you have a constitutional right to an attorney. You need one. He had every right to have an attorney. That's how our legal system works.
Comes back innocent, not guilty. They paint her with a pathological liar brush.
Oh, the butthurt hotline is ringing, Boxy. Yes. Who said Tamar was a liar? Well, let's see. Her mother said she was a liar. Her grandmother said she was a liar. Various other women, I think 10 in all, said, yes, we wouldn't believe Tamar even under oath. And let me point out, because Steve will never tell you, that the bulk of the jury were women. Yes, that's true too. 8 out of 12, maybe 9 out of 12 were women. None of them believed Tamar's story. Isn't that interesting? You think Steve will tell you that? I don't think so. No.
Dad, shortly after that, leaves and goes off to Hawaii for 3.
Hawaii. Hawaii. Aloha. Ohana. Well, it wasn't shortly after that, because he had to stick around long enough to have surveillance done on the house, and long enough to supposedly kill Gene Spangler. So he couldn't leave right away, Steve. He had other things to do.
2 years, then on to Manila, gets married again, has 4 more children.
Yes, they all hate Steve. All those Hodel children in the Philippines hate Steve Hodel. I wonder why that would be. I wonder.
Is married to them about 4 years, leaves them, hooks up with his secretary, June, and they get married, and he comes back. Ultimately, he comes back to San Francisco in 1990. And that's when I hooked back up with him, and for the last decade of his life.
We became very close, but I never knew him.
We become very close. I go down to see him. He comes up and sees me, and on a regular basis. And then I get that 2 a.m. phone call from June in 1999. Your father's here, the paramedics, he's collapsed, he's dead, come down. So that starts me on this incredible investigation.
Yes, you see, this story is all about Steve Hodel and his journey. It really has nothing to do with Elizabeth Short. It really has nothing to do with the Black Dahlia. It's all about Steve and his journey of discovery about all the awful things his dad did. That's why Steve keeps finding more and more and more awful things all the time, because George Hodel Jr. is a serial killer, criminal genius, and evil mastermind. Right, Boxy?
And I go down, I'm with June, we're talking about the great man and his remarkable life.
Photographs of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, in Papa's photo album.
He says, I think he would want you to have this photo book, and it's a small 3 by 5 inch photo book, going through their photos of my mom, my brothers, family.
Is he going to mention Man Ray? This is where we enter. This is where we meet Man Ray. Come on.
Man Ray photographs.
I
don't know if you know who Man Ray was.
Yes. Man Ray, another evil genius and criminal mastermind and serial killer. And George's sidekick.
He was a surrealist, famous surrealist.
Oh, surrealist, so terrible.
Very close friends with George. Anyway, and then there's this dark-haired woman, nude from the waist up, apparently.
Apparently? You can't see anything. You can't see anything in that photograph, Steve. You're supposed to think that. You can't tell.
And I said to June, who's this? She says, I don't know. Somebody your father knew from a long time ago.
Poor Steve. Now, there used to be 2 photographs that he would say were Elizabeth Short. Different women, say the same woman. One of the women recognized herself and said, no, no, that's not Black Dahlia. That's me. So Steve has just sort of finessed that. We didn't talk about that. I just said, oh, there's one photograph now. It's Elizabeth Short.
So I look at it, and I don't know to this day why Black
I know why. So we can sell books.
Dahlia came to mind.
I know why.
And it just kind of came and went. I didn't think much of it. So 2 days later, I'm talking to Tamar, my half-sister.
Tamar, what the hell are you talking about?
On the phone, she's in Hawaii. We're talking about our dad.
The remarkable man who molested me, right? As molestation victims are known to do, right, Steve? Did you ever work sex crime, Steve? Really? Juvenile? You ever work juvenile, Steve?
Remarkable life. And out of nowhere, she says, well, you know, he was a suspect in the Black Dahlia murder.
Tamar, what the hell are you talking about?
And I'm saying, Tamar, what the hell are you talking about?
Steve never disappoints us, does he, Boxy?
Where is this coming from? And she says, well, he didn't do it, but he was a suspect. And I said, well, there's no way. I said, you know, with my experience, I can show he had nothing to do with it.
Yes. George Hodel had been eliminated decades earlier, so Steve needs to go prove all over again what had already been proved. I think I have another answer for why Steve Hodel pursued that. I think it is to sell books and get on television. Don't you think so, Boxy?
That starts me on this incredible journey. I have to relocate back to LA.
What about Steve? Steve's journey, nothing to do with Elizabeth Short, nothing to do with the Black Dahlia, nothing to do with anything but Steve's journey. What happens to Steve?
And I follow the evidence, and
No, you didn't. You made up the evidence. You made it all up. All of it. Made up.
Doors keep opening, and secrets keep unfolding, and before I know it, I've made a case against him. I submit that secretly to the DA, and he comes back with, I'd file on at least 2. And not only that, but the second surprise was it wasn't just the one murder. He was a serial killer. It just expanded from there, and it's now 8 books later, and a whole bunch of serial crimes have come together.
8 books, 9 books, book of haiku, rock opera, children's letters to the Black Dahlia Avenger, Black Dahlia Avenger meets creature from the Black Lagoon, Black Dahlia Avenger meets son of Frankenstein. It's endless.
They're unsolved. So that's the quick and dirty story.
How did you feel when you discovered that your father might be not only responsible for Elizabeth Short's murder, but possibly other murders?
Horrified. I loved my dad, but I was horrified. I didn't know him. I knew him well. I was close to him, but I didn't know him.
It just didn't compute with me. I mean, I knew Dad had his problems. I had learned about Tamar and the sex and stuff, and I knew she was telling the truth.
Let me point out that Steve Hodel is the only person in the entire Hodel family who thinks Tamar was a truthful individual. No one else thinks so. Her children didn't think so. Her mother didn't think so. Her grandmother didn't think so. No one thought Tamar was a truthful individual except Steve. And why would Steve think that? Because he suited his purpose. Tamar, dear Tamar, told Steve's half-brother Duncan, I'm going to make up a story that Dad molested me. It will be amusing. The police won't know that it's a lie, and they'll arrest him, and that will be fun. And that's what she did, which is why Duncan never talked to Steve again for his entire life.
Because I knew Dad definitely had a sex problem, but murder, no way. And I didn't know anything about the Black Dahlia murder.
Oh, except he saw the pictures at the academy, and he'd watched this TV movie. But other than that, no. Other than that.
When I went through the academy, we saw photos of the crime scene because it was such an infamous unsolved. But I didn't even know her name.
Yeah, because it's all about Steve. What Steve knows, Steve's journey.
Sure. I was absolutely sure he had nothing to do with this.
I'm sure too. And you know who else is sure? Boxy is sure. Aren't you, Boxy? Boxy is very sure that George Hodel had nothing to do with the murder of... Yeah, nothing.
I made the mistake of following the evidence.
No, you didn't. You made the mistake of making up the evidence, Steve. That's the problem.
You've got the two parts of me. You've got the son who loves his father and says, I'm going to be able to establish he had nothing to do with this. And then you got the trained homicide detective on the other side who's just following the facts and the evidence and is being, as I talked about earlier, is...
Oh, Mr. Objectivity. Maybe not.
Being very objective about the whole thing. The other thing is that I knew very little about my father's life.
I was very close to my father. I didn't know anything about him. Okay. That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I didn't know all of these details until I got into the weeds.
Until I started making them up.
So there was a son's journey to understand more about his father on a separate course.
Yes, the son's journey. It's all about Steve. Nothing to do with the murder victims, real and alleged. All about Steve. All about Steve.
As well as the detective following the path of a potential crime.
So if he was the person of interest in the Black Dahlia case, why was he never arrested? Was it just lack of evidence?
Oh, well, he was under surveillance for 5.5 weeks, and they decided he had nothing to do with it. That's what really happened. What will Steve say? I don't think that's what Steve will say.
It wasn't a lack of evidence. So there are three major myths in the Black Dahlia, okay? The first one is Elizabeth Short's missing week.
All right. Now, that doesn't answer the question, Detective Hodel. Let's see if the second myth helps.
We talked about a little bit earlier. There was no missing week.
Yes, there was.
I was able to come up with 14 witnesses.
Yes. Steve likes to say that all these people saw Elizabeth Short, assuming, of course, that the detectives never read the newspaper either. Okay.
Who saw her every day of that week, okay? And 7 of those 14 knew her, so there could be no mistake. The last witness to see her was a policewoman who I interviewed, who actually talked to her hours before her murder. The second big myth was it was a standalone murder, none before.
Yes, it was a standalone murder. Nothing like it before or since. Nothing.
None after. It wasn't. There were these serial crimes. And LAPD knew it. I discovered that LAPD was investigating at least 5 of these, what they called back then chain murders. They didn't have the term serial crime, but chain murders, but they were all looking at the same suspect. And the biggie was that it was never solved. It was solved.
No, never solved. Never. Right in here, not solved.
LAPD solved it, and the DA's office solved it. And why?
Oh, Boxy. You hear what he's saying about you?
Wasn't he arrested? Well, he was arrested for the incest crime. He was arrested. But he was also at the same time suspected for the murder of his secretary.
No, he wasn't. Now, is Steve going to say it's in here? Because it's not in here.
This is a year and a half before the Dahlia murder. Ruth Spalding was his clinic secretary. LAPD suspected he overdosed her.
How do you overdose someone, Steve? Please just tell me.
And they were trying to put a case together, but he split and went to China, shutting down that case.
No, that's not at all what happened.
A year before the Dahlia murder.
How did your father meet Elizabeth?
Yes. Well, Steve likes to say that Elizabeth Short was introduced to George Hodel by Man Ray. Or sometimes as George Hodel introduced Elizabeth Short to Man Ray, one or the other. Neither's true, but Steve likes to say that.
That's a good question. Not exactly sure, but
I don't fucking know is the answer.
I believe all indications are that he met her actually as early as 1943.
All indications? And what would those be during her brief time in Los Angeles? Stephen?
As I said, Man Ray, the photographer, he was here 10 years in Los Angeles from 1940 to 1950. Man Ray did a photograph called Minotaur.
Oh, butthurt hotline. Poor Steve Hodel. Ah, someone's making fun of a retired homicide detective. I wonder who it could be.
So, nude body, a woman's body cut in half, posed, carefully posed. Man Ray and he were good friends. Man Ray was our family photographer.
Oh, yes. Man Ray, the Olin Mills of the Hodel family.
So either Man Ray introduced Elizabeth Short to...
No, did not happen. Mm-mm.
George introduced Elizabeth to Man Ray in 43.
During her, 10 days in Los Angeles? Living down by the USC campus? She magically got up to Hollywood? Somehow? Really? I don't think so. I don't think that's how it happened at all. Because I think it didn't happen.
I've actually got a painting that Man Ray did that strongly indicates that it was Elizabeth Short.
No. Man Ray did not do a painting of Elizabeth Short. No. That never happened. Only in Steve World. Right, Boxy?
And it's called the equivoque. And the face, Man Ray has the face as a crisscross pattern, an unusual geometric figure.
In an unusual artistic technique that has been used for centuries and centuries and centuries called cross-hatching. It's one of the earliest techniques in art, in the world of art, is cross-hatching. Yes, it's old. Been around for ages and ages.
Dad carved that same geometric figure on
the geometric figure called cross-hatching
her hip during the surgical bisection operation and posed it. So there's a whole bunch of linkage there, and that would have been in 1943.
So let's talk about the secret files that the prosecutors have.
Oh, Boxy, look, they're going to talk about you.
On the Black Dahlia case. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I put my case together and I go in secret to an active head district attorney.
Oh, yes. Detective Hodel went to Deputy District Attorney Stephen K. Stephen K., oh, so sad, no longer discusses Steve Hodel. Former district attorney, assistant district attorney, deputy district attorney, Stephen K. no longer discusses the Black Dahlia case. The only thing that Stephen K. will say is that there was no LAPD cover-up of the Black Dahlia case. He will say that. That's all. Don't talk about it no more.
A guy by the name of Steve K. And Steve K. worked with Bugliosi and prosecuted all of the Manson members by himself, and he was co-prosecutor with Bugliosi on Manson. Highly respected head DA, district attorney. So I go to him, and I was much surprised he was still on the job, but he was. And I went to him and said, hey, I've got this case. I want you to take a look at it and review it. Steve takes about 4 months and reviews it. He comes back and he says, well, I got to tell you, he says, you're probably right on a lot of these serial crime.
Based on this evidence is the key phrase that we're looking for. Based on this evidence. Steve Hodel's evidence is crap. So the case would be crap, which could be why Steve Hodel no longer discusses Steve Hodel and never discusses the Black Dahlia case, and probably has deep regrets about ever dealing with Steve Hodel. I'm thinking.
He says, but I would only file on 2 because I have a high filing rate. I would file capital murder on your father, on Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, and also on the Jean French murder that occurred 3 weeks later.
Based on this evidence.
Throws the body on the vacant lot. Says those two I would file and I would win in a jury trial.
I would love to get Detective Hodel on the stand in a jury trial. Oh, I would love that. I would have so much fun. You would be my best friend, Boxy. I would read from you. Yes, I would.
He says the others, you're probably right about them, but he says there's not quite enough. I have a high threshold. He says I would file on those two, and I have no doubt I'd win in court.
I do. I have a big doubt. Big.
I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and write the book and present it to the public.
Oh, do you see what just happened there? Did you see what just happened? Did Steve Hodel go to the LAPD and say, "Hi guys, can I see my dad's file, please"? No, he didn't do that. Nope, he didn't. He could have, but he didn't. I wonder why that would be. Now they won't show it to him.
And present it to LAPD. And before the book came out, I met with LAPD, and Kay went with me, the DA, and presented this to the brass, the top brass, and they kind of didn't know what to do. And the problem is there was a major cover-up. But anyway.
No, that isn't at all what happened. Brian Carr of the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division, who was custodian of the Black Dahlia case when Steve was researching it, said Steve Hodel never came to me and never asked to see the file before he wrote his book. Never. Never happened. No, that didn't happen. It was only after the book came out that Steve went to the LAPD and said, "Oh, hi, I see you guys are corrupt and terrible and covered up this murder. Would you do a favor for me now?" And they said, "No, we're not doing that. No."
The book comes out in 48 hours, and Court TV and Dateline and do all of this stuff. And 90% are on board with it. There's 10% that's saying, "No, it's a daddy dearest."
Oh, I think he's talking about me, Boxy. I think so.
Everything falls apart, blah, blah, blah. Steve Lopez was a columnist for the LA Times, and he gets digging into it. They had gone to him in secret and said, "Here's the story."
Yes, Steve likes to do things in secret. He wrote the book in secret. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He gave the book to Steve Lopez. Steve Lopez gave the book to me. And Steve Hodel's publicist said, "There's one person at the LA Times we don't want to see the book. That's Larry Harnish." Yes. And so who saw the book? Larry Harnish. Larry Harnish says, "This is like seeing the picture of Jesus on a tortilla." Not a compliment. Larry Harnish was not complimentary for Black Dahlia Avenger.
And he goes to LAPD and says, "Hey, Hodel, father's a Black Dahlia." I said, "Go away. We don't talk about unsolved cases." And looked at it 50.
Why is that funny?
5 years. So then he goes to the DA, Steve Cooley, who was the actual DA. He says, "Well, I'm not spending a dime of taxpayers' money on a 55-year-old case."
Boxy.
He says, "But you know, there is a file in the DA."
Yes, there is. Here it is. Right. Yes.
His vault on the Black Dahlia. Would you want to see that?
I'd like to see that. I would very much like to see the DA's files in the Black Dahlia case. And here they are. Almost all of them. 98%. Except for a few body shots and a few crackpot letters that are so ridiculous. I have everything.
He says, "Yeah." They go downstairs, open the vault. Cooley hands him this box. He goes upstairs into a room, sits down, opens it up. Out falls a picture of Dr. George Hodel. Says, "Well,
evil genius, criminal mastermind, serial killer, and eliminated after 5.5 weeks. Oh dear."
Oh, he was a suspect.
Yeah.
So he gets into it and does kind of a quick and dirty. You know, these guys are jumping from story to story. So he does it.
Steve Hodel is a columnist. he did a story or two. I don't think Steve Hodel is going to say that Larry Harnish says it's like seeing the face of Jesus on a tortilla. I don't think Steve Hodel is going to say that part of it. I didn't think so. I wonder why.
Article. He was a suspect back then, but he says that there were these transcripts. Apparently, they bugged up Hodel House.
They did.
Yes. For 6 weeks. So
5.5.
I go down to Cooley and say, "Hey, can I see the files? Can I make copies?" He says, "Well, I guess I have to let you." So I copy everything. Spend 4 months putting it all together.
Doesn't take 4 months to put it together. You can read it in a couple of days. I did.
And what do we have? We've got a 146-page transcript.
Boxy? Oh. What did I do? Oh, Hodel transcripts. Where are they? Ah, here they are. Oh. Yes, I have them. Here they are.
What happened was LAPD and the DA's office worked jointly together on investigating George Hodel. And they pick him up, take him to the Hall of Justice downtown. Well, I've got him in a room. They go out and they break into our home, the Soden house.
You were living there, Steve. It wasn't your home. Let me point out that George said, "The men from the telephone company were here." That's what he said. He also said, "They're out to get me."
And they wire it for sound. Hard microphones in the walls. And in the bedroom, in the living room.
In the bathroom? In the bathroom? 40 minutes in the bathroom, Steve. What was he doing?
And they 18 detectives, 24/7 around the clock for 6 weeks.
5.5.
And they're recording these live conversations. And they run a hard line from the house to Hollywood Station, the basement. I'll just read you a few statements from the transcripts.
Sure. I'm ready. Typing. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
So these are actual recordings between February and March of 1950. He has no clue that the house is wired for sound.
Oh, yes, they do. Men from the telephone company were here. They're out to get me. Haven't found it yet. Must be around somewhere. They knew. They went down to the basement, digging. What did they say? Not a trace. He knew. He knew from day one.
And he's talking to a friend. You don't have the right connections at the DA's office.
Oh, Steve, you're skipping ahead quite a bit. This is the best payoff I've seen between law enforcement agencies. You do not have the right connections. I'd like to get a connection made in the DA's office. Any imperfections would be found. They will have to be perfect. Don't confess ever. 2 and 2 is not 4. We're just a couple of smart boys. Ha 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 ha.
Don't confess ever. Supposing I did kill the Black Devil.
Oh, let's see here. Where is that? Now, Steve is skipping quite a bit. Skipping about how men from the DA's office questioned his mother in exact detail. And George Hodel explaining how he was questioned in the DA's office. Then he says, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead."
We can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. Well, that's the secretary he overdosed before the...
You can't overdose somebody, Steve. Come on. Only in the parallel reality of Steve Hodel can you overdose someone.
Crime. And she could have connected him to dating Elizabeth Short. And then he talks about the murder of his secretary. He says, "I put a pillow over her head, covered her."
Steve is skipping quite a bit. Quite a bit. Oh dear. Oh, does the name Hernandez mean anything to you? Conversation also referred to communist.
With a blanket. Got a taxi, called Georgia Street, receiving hospital, expired at 12:39. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out, killed her. Then he says, I'm in trouble, Black Dahlia.
Oh, no, Steve. He doesn't say I'm in trouble. It's the man saying I'm having trouble with the equipment.
Passport, police have pictures of me.
No, Steve skipped quite a bit. Pages and pages and pages. Pages and pages and pages. Steve Hodel skipped. Let's see. No. Oh! George Hodel snoring. How fascinating for them.
The girl, I thought I destroyed all of them. But the real kicker was on the third day of the transcripts. I'm reading it. There was a woman who tried to call the police.
Oh, we don't know that. We don't know that. Lady sobbing. Let's see. Lady reciting poetry. Conversation with lady. Noise. Oh, yes, here we are. Woman asking for operator several times. She's not calling the police. She's asking for the operator.
She clearly is drugged. She's staggering around.
None of that's in here. No. Doesn't say any of that.
Picks up the phone and dials the operator. And
sounded as though she was crying.
Apparently, she's been drugged and probably passes out.
None of that's here. No. None of that. No.
And 2 hours later, I'm reading the transcripts, and I can't quite believe it. Here, February 18th, 1950, 7:35 p.m. Hodel, Franklin House bugging tape, School 1. 4:20 p.m. Woman asking for operator several times. Sounded as though she was crying. 4:25. Woman.
Oh, you left at 4:22. No sound.
Asking for operator again, and then
4:26. No noise. 4:35. Someone running around, walking around. 5:18. Man and woman talking. Could not understand. 6:05 p.m. Man and woman talking for a few minutes.
8:20 p.m.
Oh, Steve, you've left out typing. Typing. Oh.
Sounded as though the two men went down the stairs, entered the basement.
Down steps, entered the basement, and began digging.
And this is this mirror Haringa and Dad. And began digging. A woman screamed.
Oh, no. You left out something was referred to, not a trace. It also appears as though a pipe was being hit. Woman screamed. Woman screamed again.
More blows. A woman screams again.
No, doesn't say that. Woman screamed. Woman screamed again.
And this is day 3 of a stakeout. And I'm saying, what the hell? Why aren't they out the door over there and doing a rescue?
They want to listen to George Hodel typing, I think. I think that's pretty interesting.
They're only like 6 minutes away from the house, but they do nothing. So basically what we have, as I see it, is either a serious felony assault, but more likely I'm convinced it was a murder.
Yes, you want it to be a murder. Let me point out, since Steve will never tell you, that later that evening, what happens? He calls someone up. Hello, George Hodel. You advertise for the studio? Want to come over and see it? Now, really, if you had just killed someone, would you invite somebody over to look at the house? I don't think so. I don't think that's what a murderer generally does. No, don't think so.
Hey, you also kind of have to understand LA and what was happening at the time. Chief Parker was literally weeks away from assuming command as the new chief. He wants to clean up Dodge, get rid of all the corruption.
No, none of that's true either. No, no. That had already happened under a previous chief, Chief Wharton, had done an internal affairs investigation of the department. Found a few bad apples, but generally a good department. So that had been done already.
It was a real life LA Confidential.
No, it wasn't. No.
Back then. And he wanted to turn it around and clean things up.
No.
So I think there was some midnight oil burning at City Hall, and they said, "What do we do if this comes out? We can't take over and clean up Dodge. Maybe let's."
None of this makes any sense at all. No, none. No. None of this happened. No. It's amazing anyone believes this nonsense. It's utter rot.
Just lock this away for now and come back to it in the future.
And of course, they never came back to it.
Of course, they never did. And of course, the real sad thing is that he would go on to kill additional. That's where they have LAPD and the brass have blood on their hands. They just remained locked away for 55 years.
So amusing.
So the woman that had called crying and then was later believed to be murdered was...
No one believed that she was murdered except for Steve. Are you going to ask who she was, maybe? That would be a good question. Are you good enough interviewer to ask that?
Is that the Black Dahlia or another woman?
Oh, that was it.
Oh, this lady's paying attention. Elizabeth Short was killed in 47 and the tapes were from 1950. Oh. She must have fallen asleep. What if there's any caffeine in coconut milk? What do you think, Boxy?
Another woman. This was in 1950, so this is
3 years later. So no?
3 years after the Black Dahlia murder.
Do you know who that victim is?
Yes, Steve. Who is she? I'd like to know. Boxy would like to know.
No, we don't. Oh.
No, we don't know who she was. Because no one was killed. That's why.
All we know is what the transcript says. She probably was never identified. We do know that they believe there may be bodies buried in the basement. The DA.
They believe that? Who they? Who they? You mean Steve? They? Who?
Back then, in 1950, contacted a plumber who had done some work at the house and said, "Hey, you had done work in the basement. Did you see any digging or any graves?"
And he said, "Nope, I didn't."
Plumber says, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. I just did my job.
I just did my plumbing and went home.
And fix what needed to be fixing. I wasn't looking around for graves." Well, oddly enough, fast forward some years ago, I had the opportunity to have a cadaver dog.
Oh, Buster the three-legged cadaver dog. So much fun. So dead.
Do a search of the location. And he actually, Buster, actually alerted at 4 different locations in the basement. We recovered soil samples, and those came back and were analyzed.
Yes, the soil samples after a year? 2 years? How long was it? My golly, Steve is leaving out an awful lot of his story here.
By Dr. Arpad Voss, who said,
who is a total con man like Steve.
Body farm. They came back positive for human remains. And I, of course, went to LAPD and said, "Hey, we're too busy, we can't do anything."
Yes, self-promoting true crime author who self-publishes, F off. I don't blame them at all. Why should they help you?
The problem is LAPD doesn't want to come out. If they verify my investigation, they're throwing mud or blood on the hands and faces of our 2 greatest heroes, Chief Parker and Chief of Detectives Thad Brown.
You know what? Nobody at the LAPD knows who Chief Parker was. And no one at the LAPD certainly knows who Thad Brown was. No one. No one. He's forgotten. Might as well say it was James Two Gun Davis. No. No one knows. Mm-mm.
Who was in charge of the investigation?
Or Charlie Sebastian. No, they don't know. Ask one current LAPD officer. I say there, fellow officer, who is Charlie Sebastian? You think they know? Mm-mm.
And they're LAPD's two greatest heroes, so they don't want anything to do with this. It's like, better remain unsolved and rather than damage our greatest heroes.
More like the head of the cold case unit looked at Steve Hodel's claims and said, it ain't there. That's what really happened.
That must be really frustrating on your part. How has your family felt about you writing a book about the Black Dahlia case?
Oh, please tell us about the Hodel family drama. Well, I can tell you some of the Hodels hate Steve for writing the book, and a few have cashed in. The ones who hate Steve are all the Philippine Hodels. They hate Steve. Duncan Hodel never talked to Steve again in his life. The people who got on the George Hodel gravy train, well, Fauna Hodel #1, Rasha Pecanero, and Yvette Gentile. They're all on the George Hodel gravy train. Yeah, that's how they feel about it.
Well, it's kind of split, divided. I had two brothers. Mike's passed on, but Kelvin is totally on board. Tamar passed away a few years ago, but she's totally on board.
Yeah. Tamar was a little miffed with Steve when Black Dahlia Avenger came out because he didn't tell her what he was doing. And Steve found a way to calm her down. Yes, he did. He calmed her down. Yes.
Tamar's children, totally on board with it.
Make a scam? Yep.
Filipinos side of the family, so they're not on board at all.
They hate his guts. They hate his guts. Yeah.
So in the end, after investigating your father, how many murders do you think he
50 murders in 50 years. And counting.
Committed in his lifetime?
So I've just come out with the early years. He started as a teenager and never stopped. So it's a 2-book edition called The Early Years, which covers his crimes in the 20s and the 30s. And of course, these later ones are the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And
he was Zodiac. Don't forget Zodiac. Steve hasn't mentioned Zodiac. How peculiar.
50 years of crime, 50 years of murder, and 50 victims. So averaging one a year, let's say. And, he was like a wild leopard roaming the land.
Oh, the wild leopard story. The wild leopard. Oh, I love that story. George Hodel is the reincarnation of the spirit of the killer leopard or tiger or some damn thing, some animal.
Never caught. They just kept killing and died. He actually committed suicide.
He actually committed suicide because that's not what it's on his death certificate. It's not what it says on his death certificate. Cardiomyopathy. I think I have George Hodel's death certificate. Oh yes, here's George Hodel's death certificate. Oh yes, it's right here, Boxy. And what does it say? George Hodel died of congestive heart failure and ischemic cardiomyopathy. Doesn't say a damn thing about suicide. No, it doesn't say anything about that. Only in Steve World. Only in Steve World does George Hodel commit suicide, and nowhere else.
Overdose of secondhand pills, and it wasn't out of remorse. It was because he had become.
It wasn't out of remorse. It was because Steve Hodel wants him to commit suicide, because he didn't really. No.
In his old age, he was 91, become infirm, and he was afraid he was going to be hospitalized, and all the hospital bills would eat up June's future. She was 40 years his junior.
Yeah, you know what Steve was worried about? He didn't get enough money from George Hodel's estate. That's the whole thing. You go through George Hodel's probate, and Steve is pissed because he didn't get enough money from the old man, so he decided to cash in on him. And that's what really this is all about. All of it, all of it. Yeah, that's it.
So he overdosed and decided to.
Cardiomyopathy.
And how does June feel about your books?
She was the first one I notified before publication, and I spent 4 hours on the phone with her. She says, "This isn't possible. Your father was a scholar and a remarkable healer, and none of this can be true."
Yep. I imagine that's what she said. I imagine that she's right. Butthurt hotline again. Oh, Boxy. Some retired homicide detective is very unhappy.
That was the last contact we had, which was 20 years ago. So she's definitely not on board. I suspect she knows. She has to have known and seen some of his insanity. She was married to him 30 years. But I don't think he committed any crimes. I think his last one was from 61. So I think basically she turned him around in the sense of getting him off alcohol.
Kind of serious to accuse someone of knowing about murders and not reporting it, Steve, don't you think? Don't you think that's a rather serious allegation to make against your stepmom? Maybe? I think so.
Kind of cleaned up his life, got him on a new road. In fact, there are indications that she probably just had her own suspicions.
Why do you think what made your father want to kill? Was there something in his family background, or do you think it was just the alcohol and drugs kind of changed him?
His whole theme throughout all of his crimes is the Avenger. He was a misogynist of the highest order. He was a misanthrope.
Yes, he was a misogynist and a misanthrope, and we were very close, and I loved him, but I didn't know him. How does anyone, Foxy, fall for that? I don't know.
He hated humanity. He had this stratospheric intelligence, 186 IQ.
No, he didn't. He didn't. More like 150. It's online. You can check if you know where to look. More like 150, something like that. Don't expect Steve Hodel to ever tell you the truth. He will inflate and exaggerate absolutely everything.
And oftentimes you will see serious problems. I think there's congenital insanity there. I think he was probably the victim of incest or sexual abuse, either from his mother or some other family member. He was continually being rejected by his peers because he was so advanced. And
George Hodel was rejected by his peers, but through cocktail parties, really, and was among the Hollywood elite, supposedly, but rejected. But that makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Head of them, and then the rejection from the professor's wife. All of this came together in a perfect storm.
Yes, the professor's wife, that maybe he wasn't a professor, and I can't find this incident documented anywhere. Can't find any young girls named Folly. Is it true? Steve will ask his 3 readers. Is it true? No one knows. No one cares.
To create this incredible monster, to my knowledge, has never ever been.
This incredible monster, we were very close. I didn't know him at all. Sure, that makes sense.
Quite a serial killer like him in that sense. Plus, this whole murder is a fine art aspect.
What a fascinating discussion. How can listeners
buy my books? Oh, buy Steve's books. Buy them all. Buy Black Dahlia Avenger 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the appendixes. Most Evil, Further Most Evil, Beyond Most Evil, Valley of the Black Dahlia Avenger, Haiku, Children's Letters to the Black Dahlia Avenger.
Get your books, and if you have an official website.
Sure,
it's buymybooks.com. Oh, you know what? Steve hasn't mentioned his mini-series yet. This is the one I call Don't Hold Your Breath.
Hodel.com transcripts.com is my website. I do a regular blog there, trying to update all the evidence. It goes back 15 years, so it's a great research for anybody who's interested in the other crimes.
Evidence.
There's 8 books, but it's really all one ongoing investigation. I mean, you know, it started out with...
Detective Hodel's case is so weak and flimsy and crappy that he will need to find new evidence and new clues until the day he dies. That's my prediction. Right, Boxy?
Black Dahlia Avenger, and it's never stopped.
Wow, this has just been amazing. I've learned so much about the Black Dahlia story, and it's been...
No, you haven't learned anything. It's all garbage. Nope.
Such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, it's great to be with you, Jacy.
Well, Boxy, that was fun. You tired? You know, this stuff ain't bad. I think I like the land of Ohana. Do you like the land of Ohana? Yes, I'm not sure what Ohana is, but it's the land of Ohana. All right, then. Well, signing off for now. This is not Dr. Alan Campbell and Boxy from Pineapple and Coconuts and Murder. Next time, we may be back to Tea and Biscuits and Murder. You never know. So long for now. Ta-ta.